Mytreese Richardson.
Mytreese Richardson's
Mytreese Richardson.
Mytreese Richardson name.
Mitrice.
30 a.m. A sheriff's station gate swings open. A 24-year-old woman walks out alone. No phone, no money, no car keys. 40 miles from home in the dark. 6 hours later, she's spotted in a stranger's backyard, 5 miles away. Then nothing. 11 months of silence. Then searchers find her, naked, partially mummified. In a canyon no one had any reason to look. And the body? Moved, against the coroner's direct orders. The video that could explain it all? Sheriff's Department said it didn't exist. It did. Her name was Mytreese Richardson, and what happened to her was never supposed to come out.
It started with a show of unity. LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva joining friends of Mytreese Richardson in a prayer circle.
Mytrice's father.
If I have to stand out there and beat a snare drum and expose my unphysique body to get to attention to this case, that's what I'm going to do.
She vanished.
This would be such a great present that you can give us, is to find Mitrice, and we need your help.
The police arrest Mitrice and take her to the Lost Hills station. Her car is impounded. Her wallet and cell phone are left inside the vehicle.
Welcome back to Hidden Truth. This case involves mental health crisis and an unresolved death. Viewer discretion advised. Mytreese Richardson was 24, a college graduate, a former cheerleader, on her way to becoming a psychologist for foster kids. Everyone who knew her says the same thing: sharp, magnetic, full of plans. On September 16, 2009, none of that mattered to the system that picked her up. What happened next wasn't an accident. It was a chain of decisions made by people who are still alive today, who still won't fully explain themselves. Tonight, we walk through every one of those decisions, because the gaps in this case were never gaps. They were choices. Before we go any further, you need to understand who Mytreese Richardson actually was, because everything that happened to her only makes sense once you see what was taken. She was born in 1985, raised with a fire in her that people noticed early. Family describes her as electric, the kind of kid who walked into a room and made sure the room knew she was there. She competed in beauty pageants. She cheered. She sang, danced, made people laugh without trying. But Mitrice wasn't just charisma. She was sharp in a way that mattered. In 2008, she graduated from California State University, Fullerton, with a bachelor's degree in psychology. She wasn't done. She was already working as an intern under a forensic psychologist, soaking up case theory, ethics, legal frameworks, building toward graduate school, and a career working with children in the foster care system. Think about that for a second. The field she wanted to enter was built on understanding minds in crisis. She wanted to help kids nobody else had time for. Her mentor during that internship, Dr. Rhonda Hampton, watched her work and saw something rare: a young woman who could absorb complex psychological theory and apply it like she'd been doing it for years. At the time of her disappearance, Mitrice was in a 2-year relationship with her girlfriend, Tessa Moon. She had people who loved her: a mother, Lettice Sutton, who described her as her heartbeat; a father carrying his own complicated history, determined to make things right for his daughter. So how does someone like this, educated, loved, building a future, end up dead in a remote canyon less than a year later? That question is the entire reason this case still haunts Los Angeles. Here's what you need to hold on to as we move forward. Nobody in Mitrice's life, not her mother, not her mentor, not her girlfriend, saw any documented history of serious mental illness before that September night. There were small things. A strange text message here. A phone call that didn't quite track. But nothing that screamed crisis. Nothing that prepared anyone for what was coming. Sexcloud Toko, according to ABC7 Los Angeles, investigators later said they found evidence in journals and text messages suggesting Mitrice may have been suffering from bipolar disorder, and that she had possibly gone as long as 5 days without meaningful sleep before the night everything changed. That detail matters, because it reframes the entire story. This wasn't a woman who was reckless or out of control by nature. If those investigators were right, this was a mental health crisis, sudden, severe, and almost certainly invisible to anyone who hadn't seen her in the days leading up to it. And that raises the question that should sit with you for the rest of this video. If this was a medical emergency, why did it end with handcuffs instead of help? On the evening of September 16, 2009, Mytreese Richardson got in her Honda Civic and drove north on the Pacific Coast Highway toward a restaurant in Malibu called Jeffrey's. She had no idea that drive would be the last normal thing she ever did. What happened inside that restaurant over the next 2 hours would set off a chain of decisions by law enforcement that her family has spent over a decade trying to get answers about. Decisions that, according to multiple independent reviews, broke no policy and yet ended with a 24-year-old woman walking out into the night completely alone. In the next chapter, we go inside Jeffrey's restaurant and we walk through exactly what staff and patrons saw that convinced them something was seriously wrong with the young woman at table 6. September 16, 2009, early evening. Mytreese Richardson steers her Honda Civic north on Pacific Coast Highway toward a restaurant called Jeffrey's Ocean Views, celebrity clientele, twinkling string lights along the cliffside patio. She parks. She walks in. And almost immediately something is off. A valet notices it first. He climbs into her car to park it and finds the inside in disarray papers, clutter. A kind of chaos that doesn't match a woman dressed for a night out at one of Malibu's most upscale restaurants. When he tries to make conversation, she starts talking about numbers, codes, hidden meaning in things that to him sound like nothing at all. Inside, a hostess seats her alone. She orders a $65 steak, a cocktail. Normal enough until she gets up from her own table and sits down with a party of strangers. What would make a woman walk away from her own dinner to sit with people she's never met? The strangers at that table later told investigators she spoke in riddles. She mentioned voices. She said she was decoding something. One of them would later describe her as clearly, visibly unwell, not drunk, not high, but somewhere else entirely. This is the moment that matters most in this entire chapter. Nobody at that restaurant believed Mitrice was dangerous. They believed she was sick. The staff didn't want her arrested. They wanted her safe. When Mitrice tried to leave without paying her $89 tab, employees scrambled to help her, offering to cover the bill themselves, trying to track down a number she could call. The only number she could remember was her elderly great-grandmother's, a 91-year-old woman who had no way to drive out and get her. Faced with a guest who couldn't pay, couldn't explain herself, and couldn't safely be sent back out on Pacific Coast Highway alone, the restaurant's manager made a call to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station, not to press charges, to get her help. According to LAist, an internal department email later surfaced confirming deputies had specifically discussed Mitrice's strange behavior as a factor in deciding how to handle her that night, undercutting the department's later public claim that nothing about her seemed unusual. Sextown, sit with that for a second. The official record, the one given to the press, said Mitrice appeared completely normal to the responding deputies. But internal communication tells a different story, one where her behavior was discussed, noted, acknowledged. So why does that gap exist? Why would a department say one thing internally and something else publicly? When 3 deputies arrived at Jeffrey's, Mitrice passed a field sobriety test. No alcohol, no drugs in her system. Her car was searched. A small amount of marijuana found in the console, along with several unopened bottles of liquor in the trunk, more consistent with someone hosting a party than someone in a public crisis. One witness, the valet who'd first noticed her rifling through his CDs, asked a deputy directly what was wrong with her. According to testimony given years later in a civil lawsuit, the deputy's answer was blunt. She was, in his words, mentally unwell. Not drunk, not faking it, genuinely unwell. That single exchange would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in everything that followed, because it proves, in the words of the people who were there that night, that law enforcement knew exactly what they were dealing with before they ever put her in the back of that patrol car. What happened next would take Mytreese Richardson 20 miles from that restaurant, deep into the Santa Monica Mountains and into a jail cell where the real countdown began. By the time Mytreese Richardson was placed in the back of that patrol car, the people at Jeffrey's believed the danger had passed. That is the most painful part. The staff thought they had done the responsible thing. They had not handed her car keys back. They had not watched her stumble into the Malibu night alone. They had called the one institution everyone is taught to call when a person is in danger and no one knows what else to do: law enforcement. But the moment Mitrice left Jeffries, control of her life moved from worried strangers to a system built on paperwork, liability, and procedure. The drive from Jeffries to the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Station was not a quick trip around the corner. It was a long, dark ride through the Santa Monica Mountains, away from the restaurant, away from the coast, away from her car, and away from anyone who knew her. Inside that patrol car was a 24-year-old woman who had been speaking about signs, numbers, voices, and secret meanings. Outside that patrol car were winding roads, black hills, and a night that would later become impossible to separate from her death. And here is the question that begins this chapter. When a woman is clearly not thinking normally, does putting her in a cell make her safe, or does it only make the system feel like it has handled the problem? At the station, Mitrice was booked. Her fingerprints were taken. Her mugshot was taken. Her record was checked. There were no serious warrants, no violent history, no long criminal file that explained what was happening. She was not treated like a daughter in crisis. She was treated like a low-level arrestee. And while Mitrice sat inside that station, her mother, Lettice Sutton, was already trying to understand what had happened. Lettice called the sheriff's station while her daughter was being brought in. She was confused, frightened, trying to stay calm. She told the deputy on the phone that Mitrice was not from that area. She said it was dark. She said her daughter did not have a car. She made the fear painfully clear she did not want Mitrice wandering out alone. That phone call should have changed everything. Because now the station knew something the restaurant had already known. Mitrice was not simply a woman who skipped a bill. She was a young woman whose own mother believed she was vulnerable. So why didn't that warning stay attached to her file? Why did it not follow her from the phone call to the watch commander, from the watch commander to the jailer, from the jailer to the release decision? Sex girl, according to CBS News, Mytreese Richardson was released from the Malibu Lost Hills station in the early morning hours after being booked for failing to pay the restaurant bill and possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. The same report noted that the station was unfamiliar to her family, not served by buses at night, and that her family said she had no practical way home. Sextant. Now listen to what that really means. Her car had been impounded. Her purse was not with her. Her phone was not with her. Her money was not with her. She was roughly 40 miles from home in an area she did not know after midnight in the dark. The department's position was that she appeared fine, that she showed no signs of mental illness or intoxication, that she was an adult, that they had no legal reason to hold her. But this is where the viewer has to ask the uncomfortable question. If she was so fine, why had restaurant staff called for help? If she was so fine, why had witnesses described her as speaking in riddles? If she was so fine, why had her own mother called the station terrified that she might be released into the night? And if everyone around her kept seeing danger, how did the final decision still become? Let her walk. The jailer would later say Mitrice was offered the chance to stay until morning, but declined. That detail has been repeated for years. But even if it is true, it creates another question, not an answer. Can a person in the middle of a possible manic or psychotic episode meaningfully understand the danger of refusing help? Because she said no only makes sense if she was capable of making safe decisions. Everything that happened before that moment suggested she might not be. And then, sometime after midnight, the gate opened. Mytreese Richardson walked out of the station alone. No ride waiting. No mother at the door. No deputy taking her back to her car. No phone to call for help. Just a young woman stepping into darkness while the people responsible for her release went back inside. This is the point where the case stops feeling like a disappearance and starts feeling like a countdown. Because from that moment forward, every minute mattered. Every road she chose, every house she passed, every car that drove by, every sound in the mountains, all of it became part of a timeline nobody would fully reconstruct. And the cruelest part is this. Her mother had already imagined the nightmare. She had already said she did not want to wake up to a report of her daughter lost somewhere. Hours later, that fear became real. In the next chapter, Mitrice is seen alive one last time 5.5 miles from the station, sitting in a stranger's backyard, telling them she is just resting. Then she vanishes into terrain so unforgiving that even trained search teams would struggle to explain how she got there. Hours after Mytreese Richardson walked out of the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Station, the night began turning into morning. Somewhere between the station and the hills of Monte Nido, she covered miles of dark, unfamiliar road. No phone, no money, no car, no safe plan. Just a young woman moving through an area that even locals would not casually walk through before sunrise. And this is where the case becomes almost impossible to imagine. How does someone who has just been released from custody, with no transportation and no clear state of mind, travel more than 5 miles through canyon roads in the dark? Was she walking the whole time? Did someone pick her up? Did she know where she was going? Or was she simply moving because stopping felt dangerous? Around 6:30 in the morning, a homeowner in Monte Nido noticed a woman in his backyard. She was described as tall, slim, black, with afro-style hair. She appeared to be resting near the back of the property. When the homeowner asked if she was okay, the woman reportedly answered that she was just resting. That answer is haunting because it sounds calm, almost ordinary. But nothing about that moment was ordinary. A woman matching Mitrice's description was sitting in a stranger's backyard, miles from where she had been released, after a night where her mother had already warned the station that she should not be left alone. The homeowner called the sheriff's station. This should have been the moment everything snapped into focus. A young woman had just been released alone. Her mother was terrified. She was unfamiliar with the area. She had no car. Now, a woman matching her description was seen in a backyard only hours later. So why did the response not feel urgent? Why was this not treated as a race against time? By the time deputies came to the property, the woman was gone. And with that, Mytreese Richardson disappeared again, this time into a landscape that could swallow a person whole. Underscore, according to the Los Angeles Times, investigators later believed the woman in the Cold Canyon Road backyard was Mitrice. The article also reported that investigators believed she may have been seen 2 more times that morning, once walking along Malibu Canyon Road around 7:30 a.m., and later on Piuma Road east of Malibu Canyon. That detail changes the shape of the entire investigation. Because if those sightings were her, Mitrice was alive for hours after the station released her. Hours, not minutes. That means there may have been a window where she could still have been found. A window where a better response, a faster alert, a wider search, or a more serious understanding of her condition might have changed everything. This is not hindsight for drama. This is the central pain of the case. Her mother was calling. Witnesses were calling. Pieces of the timeline were appearing in real time. But the system did not seem to treat those pieces like an emergency map. And then came the searches. Teams combed the Malibu Canyon area. Family and friends chased leads. Law enforcement followed sightings that stretched from local roads to Las Vegas. Every possible clue became a new wave of hope. Every dead end became another injury. Imagine being her mother during those months. A phone rings, and for 1 second, you believe it might be the call. A stranger says they saw someone who looked like her. A rumor spreads. A location is mentioned. You drive. You ask questions. You stare at faces in crowds. You scan buses, sidewalks, gas stations, hotels, and canyon roads. How long can a family live between hope and grief before both become the same thing? The Los Angeles Times reported that in the 11 months after Mitrice vanished, the mystery twisted through false sightings from the ocean to Las Vegas. Her family questioned many of those claims, but her mother remained focused on the area where Mitrice had disappeared. And painfully, she was right. The search would eventually cover massive sections of Malibu Canyon. The article reported that law enforcement carried out 4 searches covering about 40 square miles. That number sounds large, but in canyon terrain, distance can be deceptive. A person can be close on a map and still impossible to see. Brush, slopes, ravines, heat, darkness, everything works against searchers. Still, one question stayed alive underneath every search. If Mitrice was in that area the whole time, why did it take 11 months to find her? That question does not have a clean answer. It has terrain. It has confusion. It has possible missed opportunities. It has a family insisting that the earliest hours mattered most. And then, in August 2010, the case turned from missing person to death investigation. Park rangers were searching a remote area connected to illegal marijuana activity when they discovered human remains in Dark Canyon. The location was rugged, hidden, and difficult to access. It was not a place most people would wander into casually. The remains were later confirmed to be Mytreese Richardson. After 11 months of searching, the answer her family feared had arrived. But it did not bring peace. It brought a new set of questions. How did she get into Dark Canyon? Why were her remains found in such a remote place? What happened between the last sighting and the moment she died? And why would the handling of her body create one of the most disturbing twists in the entire case? Because what happened next was not just controversial. It raised the kind of question that makes a family stop trusting the investigation itself. On August 9, 2010, the search for Mytreese Richardson finally reached the place her family had feared for almost 11 months. Dark Canyon. A place hidden inside the rugged Malibu terrain. A place difficult to reach, easy to miss, and almost impossible to understand from a map alone. California State Park Rangers were not originally there looking for Mitrice. They were searching the area for signs of illegal marijuana activity. Instead, they found human remains. The discovery should have been the beginning of answers. Instead, it became another reason this case would never feel complete. Mitrice was found naked and partially mummified. Her remains were scattered in a remote ravine. Her skull and spine were detached. Clothing items were found away from the main location. Some belongings were missing. Some bones were not recovered at first. For her family, the scene did not match the simple explanation they had been hearing for months, that Mitrice had wandered alone into the canyon and died there. Pause on that image. A young woman released after midnight, with no phone, no money, and no car is later found in one of the most remote places connected to the search area. Her body is not intact. Her clothes are not properly explained. Her cause of death cannot be determined. At what point does a missing person case become something larger than a tragedy? The answer should have depended on evidence. But that is exactly where the next problem began. Dexter Stool, according to the Los Angeles Times, a Los Angeles County coroner's official criticized sheriff's deputies for removing Mytreese Richardson's remains from the ravine without permission, saying their actions may have violated the law and undermined the thoroughness of the coroner's investigation. Dexter. That sentence is one of the most important facts in the entire case. Because when a body is found in suspicious or unclear circumstances, the scene itself becomes evidence. The position of the bones matters. The spread of the clothing matters. Soil, insects, leaves, animal disturbance, weather exposure, all of it can help investigators understand what happened before death, during death, and after death. But once the remains are moved, the original story written into the scene can never be fully restored. Sheriff's officials gave their explanation. They said it was getting dark. They said they were worried animals could damage the remains. They said the terrain was dangerous and communication at the scene was difficult. Those reasons may explain what they claimed they were thinking, but they do not erase the damage. Because the coroner's side said they had not authorized the removal of the full skeletal remains. The Los Angeles Times reported that Assistant Chief Coroner Ed Winter said he was very clear with sheriff's officials and that he could not recall another case where an agency moved entire skeletal remains without approval. That is not a small disagreement. That is a breakdown between the agency that found the body and the agency responsible for examining it. And for Mitrice's family, it sounded like the same pattern all over again. First, warnings were not treated with enough urgency. Then, the early sighting did not produce the rescue they hoped for. Then, the body was found. And even then, the scene was not preserved in the way the family believed it should have been. How many times can one family hear mistake before it starts to feel like something worse? The next day, the coroner's team reportedly tried to return to the location. But according to the case record and later reporting, they had trouble finding the exact site. More bones were later recovered. And months after that, when Mitrice's mother visited the area with an independent forensic expert, another bone connected to Mitrice was reportedly found. Imagine being a mother and discovering that. Not through an official call, not through a completed investigation, but by standing in the place where your daughter was found, only to realize that pieces of her had still been left behind. That kind of moment does not just create grief, it destroys trust. And once trust is gone, every unanswered detail becomes heavier. Why was she naked? Where were the missing clothing items? Why were some bones not found immediately? Could the scene have shown whether she died there or was placed there? Could the position of her remains have revealed whether she was alone, injured, restrained, or moved? These questions are not dramatic decoration. They are the questions that families ask when the official answer is undetermined. And that word undetermined is where the case becomes almost unbearable. It means the system could not say she was murdered. It also means the system could not say exactly how she died. No confirmed cause, no confirmed final moments, no confirmed person responsible. Just a young woman gone, a canyon full of missing answers, and a family left to argue against silence. Some investigators believed Mitrice may have been in the middle of a severe mental health crisis when she disappeared. Her family has never accepted that this alone explains everything. To them, the terrain, the condition of her remains, the scattered clothing, and the mishandled recovery all point toward a story that was never fully uncovered. But here is the hardest part. Without a properly preserved scene, certainty becomes harder to reach. That is why this chapter matters. Because the major twist was not only that Mytreese Richardson was found dead. The major twist was that even after she was found, the evidence that might have helped explain her death became part of the controversy. A case that needed precision got confusion. A family that needed answers got conflict. And a death that needed clarity was left with one word: undetermined. O'Day, Mytreese Richardson's death remains unresolved. No one has been charged. Her official cause of death remains undetermined. Her family still believes the full truth has never been uncovered. And as recently as November 2024, Los Angeles County increased the reward to $25,000 for information that could help solve this case. That reward exists for one reason. Someone may still know something. Maybe someone saw her after she left the station. Maybe someone knows how she reached Dark Canyon. Maybe someone knows why her final hours still do not make sense. Mytreese Richardson was not just a case file. She was a daughter, a graduate, a young woman who wanted to understand broken minds and help children who had already been forgotten. But when she needed help, the system treated her like a problem to process. This case required extensive research and time to cover every angle. If you want to read the complete investigation, the resource links will be added in the description. And if you know anything about what happened to Mytreese Richardson, now is the time to speak.